And good afternoon. My name is Ryan Belmore. It is Monday, January 8th, just past 4 p.m. And joining us for the first time this year, he has joined us almost every single month last year, I would say, pretty darn close to it. Oh, Newport Mayor Xaykham. Hold on one second here. Hold on one second. There we go. How's that, Mayor?
Sound crystal clear. Am I
I
good?
was hearing myself like 3 or 4 times. So, yeah.
Well, one Ryan Belmore is enough for all of us. So
That's it.
glad you got that.
Happy New Year, Mayor.
Happy New Year to you as well. Thanks for having me on.
I remember a time, and it was not that long ago, where almost everything in the city got quiet in January. That is certainly not the case anymore, whether it's what's happening around town or what's happening in city government.
Yeah, I look at the start of this year already, and the council's already had two substantial, very long meetings on a range of different topics and issues that we're covering. We are diving right into this year, ready to tackle these issues head on. The entire council has been willing to roll up their sleeves and work really hard on trying to figure out what the right policy solutions are, what direction we should be giving to the administration as we start to help Newport deal with a lot of the challenges ahead.
Got about 100 topics to get to. We'll probably get to 5 of them, but certainly I'll follow up with anything that we need to get to. Let's just start with on Saturday, there was a workshop with the state legislative body that represents Newport as well. Biggest takeaway from that meeting?
We're aligned. I would say that both our legislators and our council are very focused on quality of life issues for residents. Everybody acknowledges that Newport is a gem for the state of Rhode Island, not just in terms of a place to visit, but in terms of the revenue that we drive for the entire state. The focus now shifts to how do we ensure that we as a city in Newport have the resources we need to continue being that special place. And that starts with taking care of the families that live here, that work here, that make Newport work, and that make it such a unique and special place to visit.
Was there anything surprising that came out of the meeting? Anything that either the legislators came to you with, or that you went to the legislators with, that you weren't on the same page?
Well, I'll say this. We took a different approach this year than we took in prior years, right? Prior years, we'd get together and we would give them a list of a half a dozen plus priorities that we wanted them to consider. This year, we took some feedback. We looked at the results that previous years had yielded us, and we said we need to be much more targeted with the things that we're asking for of our legislators. They need to be things that we know that they should be capable of helping us accomplish at the State House, and then we need to help provide them with that support. So in that top tier, those issues of things that we knew with immediacy we wanted were areas where there was 100% of consensus on the city council. Every councilor agreed, this makes sense, we should be going for it, let's go full send in asking our General Assembly legislators to help us accomplish these things. First, we know that cruise ships drive a substantial amount of tourism into the state of Rhode Island, but they also require a fair amount of infrastructure and coordination to actually ensure that those boats are landing, they're getting processed safely, and that those visitors are then getting off to the destinations they go to in our city. The fee per head that was being charged for that was $3 a head each way, $6 round trip for visitors coming to Newport on cruise ships. Now, when you start thinking about there being over 85,000 cruise ship visitors last year, over 105,000 scheduled for next year, that is a huge number of people coming through our city that are paying a relatively low sum for landing in Newport and then touring around our beautiful city. Specifically, that site where they land, Parati Park, we know needs substantial improvements. That seawall alone is going to cost more than $10 million to repair. The Harbor Masters building, similarly, specifically of importance and concern, the restrooms in that building are badly in need of repair. That's going to be another substantial chunk of funding. Our goal is to have those cruise ship fees help offset the costs that are associated with that specific site where they're landing. And so we're proposing that the increase in the cruise ship fee per head go from $3 per head to $10 per head each way for a round trip fee of $20. We have looked at neighboring communities to try and understand what that cruise ship fee is. It's a little challenging to find that data because a lot of other sites are private port terminals, sometimes in industrial locations, rather than right in the middle of a downtown. But the best guidance we have from the administration and the research they've been is that at that $10 a head each way fee, we would be squarely within market. And Newport is a top destination for cruise ships in the Northeast. We know that. It's time that we make sure we can continue being a place that visitors feel comfortable coming, that has the infrastructure to support it. The second place, go ahead.
Oh, good. I'll remember.
The second place we focused is on repairs to the cliff walk. Every single day in our community, we are on the front lines of climate change. And so every neighborhood from the 5th Ward to the Point, to Easton's Beach, to the Cliff Walk, we are seeing the impact of climate change firsthand. And the city is having to make a constant determination as to where we adapt and rebuild or we retreat. The Cliff Walk is one of those areas that we made the decision we wanted to make a commitment to rebuilding. With almost 1 million visitors per year coming to the Cliff Walk, and a number of residents taking advantage of that cliff walk every single day, we know that this is an important amenity that needs to be preserved. It's one of the top tourism attractions in the state. And so we've made a very clear ask to the governor's office to help provide funding for cliff walk repairs in his budget this year.
Boston Globe had a story out just today about just a couple hours ago about the cliff walk. Fully rebuilding could cost $13.75 million. So far, the city hasn't been able to find the funding. It sounds like certainly the search is still going on for the funding.
Absolutely. We are leaving no stone unturned and are being absolutely relentless in the pursuit of this. I give a lot of credit to our administration, who have been reaching out consistently, finding different federal grant opportunities. We've gotten great support from the governor on this front. I would also like to give a shout out to our congressional delegation, right? Both Senators Reid and Whitehouse and now Congressman Amo have been terrific at backing up our request for some aid from the federal government for repairs to the cliff walk. Now, you don't connect with every swing you take, right? So we haven't hit on the first couple, but that doesn't mean to say that we don't have a whole bunch more at-bats, including a couple that are currently floating out there that we're very hopeful for, will help us offset any additional need that we have that the state isn't able to provide.
Mayor, you mentioned the seawall over at Parati Park, the cliff walk, certainly both right on the ocean. Climate change could have something to do with it. Some say maintenance might have. Let's tie in a third one here, the Easton's Beach Rotunda. Why, in your view, fairly new to the council, is it just coincidence these are all failing at the same time? Is it not maintenance happening over years? Why are we seeing these couple things all fail around the same time?
Yeah, we have undoubtedly seen an acceleration in the infrastructure needs, not only here in Newport, but across our state, as unfortunately we witnessed upstate recently, and across the country. That was a big part of the impetus behind the federal package for infrastructure that you saw. It was a big part of the reason why Gina Raimondo, when she was serving as governor, made such a hard push behind roadworks. We need to be making big investments in our infrastructure. Now, that slow change, that slow development of the backlog and repairs to our infrastructure has been accelerated by the pace of climate change that we've been experiencing here. We undoubtedly are seeing more heavy rain events every single year than we ever had previously. You just mentioned a lot of the lower lying areas where we have big infrastructure needs, but let's not forget about the other neighborhoods we have in Newport that are experiencing substantial flooding. The whole Prescott Hall neighborhood adjacent to the North End projects. You have areas along the middle of Newport over towards the reservoirs. These are not low-lying areas that are suffering flooding because of high tide and storm surge. These are areas that with every major rainstorm are experiencing flooding events at higher elevations. Climate change has accelerated, and its impact on us is getting worse and worse every year, not at a consistent rate, but an exponentially faster rate, which has increased the amount of need that we have to start tackling these big infrastructure projects. These are not $2 and $3 million projects, right? These are 10, 20, 50, $100 million projects that we are going to have to find a way to pay for. The Newport City Council at the end of this month, on the 31st, is going to be receiving a presentation from the administration on our capital improvement plan. This is the 5-year plan for infrastructure needs that we have as a community in order to keep Newport continuing forward in the condition that it has. We're expecting to have a pretty big number come out of that meeting. We don't know what it is. When you look at prior years, you can start to get a feeling for what that might look like. There is a big need for us to find a way to help close that funding gap that we have for our infrastructure. But we can't keep kicking the can anymore. If we keep delaying, we're going to keep seeing beloved institutions no longer have a home that are so important to our Newport residents and visitors. So we need to be making those investments and finding ways to pay for it.
You see big cities, and I preface that with that because obviously there's a lot bigger budget, come up with climate change offices and climate change officers and all of these plans. What is a small city like Newport doing to try to prepare and try to catch up with this?
I do think that you will see a resiliency officer of some type come into clear focus for the city of Newport within the next couple of years, hopefully within this budget. To date, we've been coordinating with the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. They, with the support of the Van Buren Foundation in Newport, funded a resiliency coordinator who helped work coordinating Quinnipiac Island communities on the resiliency challenges that we were facing. That's part of why we have such good plans for the infrastructure needs that we have in certain areas of our community. What we really need to be doing, though, is thinking about every decision that's being made with regards to both development, but also infrastructure being looked at through the lens of sustainability and resiliency. Is this infrastructure going to support the needs that we have for the next 20, 30, 40 years, not just getting us through the next 5 years? That's a big investment. It's going to be important. And I fully expect that the administration will take seriously having somebody focused on this effort full time.
I know for many, it's tough to keep up with what is going on in the city, every single meeting, every single decision. Last week, the week before, it kind of refloated to the top of that's the Easton Beach Rotunda, which has been a project for more than a year. This has been in the talks, but all of a sudden, it was top of mind to everybody. I don't imagine everybody to be able to keep up with every decision, but can you give us a brief history of what's happening? And this just wasn't a decision that was made last week. This has been going on for a while.
No, a number of years back, and I have to give full credit to the prior city council on this, they made the determination that at the Beach Commission's recommendation, additional research needed to be made into what the condition of those structures were and what the plan should be moving forward. And so a substantial engineering and environmental study was done on that, putting forth a recommendation that ultimately the existing buildings be demolished for safety reasons, and that we look longer term towards how we build greater resiliency at the beach, as well as any future structures having resiliency features that ensure that they're able to withstand storms. The unfortunate decision that was made was a triaging of government that's the result of us being in a position where we had to make a decision based on public safety. That structure was no longer structurally sound to continue hosting the purposes and uses of the snack bar and the carousel itself, beyond the risk that individuals had from that structure while visiting that structure is the risk that that structure itself would end up in the reservoir immediately behind the beach in the event of a major storm or hurricane. We've already seen, consistent with major storms passing through this area, the water rise as high as halfway up the berm for the reservoir immediately behind it. And so we had to triage on what we could manage doing as a community, as a city, with regards to this project. Our focus is squarely on the resiliency that we need to actually make sure that beach is still there before we can pivot our attention to the other amenities that exist on that site.
Do you think it makes sense to build there again?
I think that is a determination that is going to have to be made in the future once we get that beach itself stabilized. If you sit here and think about the fact that within our generation, before you and I are capable of collecting a Social Security check, that beach will physically be underwater. We need to be thinking about not only whether or not it makes sense to rebuild that snack bar, but what we're doing with the immediate roadway behind it that serves as a critical road linkage between us and Middletown and the reservoir to our public drinking water supply. Right? That's one of multiple reservoirs, but it's one of the most important reservoirs for the city of Newport. And to think that, that has the potential of being threatened from sea level rise and major storms is something that is a substantial threat to the safety and security of our community. And that's what requires our focus and attention right now.
What hope or has there been any movement on where the carousel? Everybody's wondering. I would love to get the carousel numbers of how many people rode it in the last full year it was operating. But there are many more keyboard warriors that are upset that it's no longer going to be there. Any home for it? Any future for it?
We are looking at any available sites across the city. We obviously have a number of public spaces that are wonderful. A lot of those have historic deed restrictions that were put in place when we originally received those parks, and so they're not eligible locations. So we can continue to hunt for that. I will reassure the viewers watching here today and anybody who might follow on with the coverage, we are making sure we preserve the carousel and its elements. And our hope is that we will be able to find that new home in short order, and hopefully raise the requisite funds to construct a new home for. But we are not going to be parting out that carousel to send off to the scrap heap. And we certainly are not going to let it sit there in a building where, with another major storm, the actual components itself could be jeopardized and no longer even be available for the future.
I think with, the Easton's Beach Rotunda story popping up, and as well as some news out of Middletown with the movie theater closing, many people on social media have been saying, "Oh, everything for families is going away. There's nothing for families anymore." And I know a lot of that has to do with private businesses, whatever they want to do with their movie theater or pickleball courts or whatever that is. Certainly, that if it's within zoning and all the proper business. Certainly that's okay to do. Just wondering what you tell people if anybody ever says to you or writes to you, this place is getting too expensive, it's not appropriate for families anymore. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That we're focused on making sure this is a place that is supporting the families who live here, first and foremost. But secondly, ensuring that Newport is a family-friendly destination for those who do come and visit here. We know that is important in order for us to remain viable as a community and as a destination. And that's why I think you see the city being a good partner in different family-friendly activities that in the future should provide those types of amenities. A great example of this is the new aquarium. If there's one thing I'm really excited about opening in 2024, it is that new Hamilton Family Aquarium that's going to be located right there in the heart of our city. I want you to think about this. We have an aquarium that's located at a public transit hub on the northern part of the downtown portion of our city. And just 2 blocks from it, thanks to work that was done by the City Council working with the Save the Bay, you now have the 2 ocean exploration vehicles that they have taking people out for tours of the bay, located right there, steps from the actual aquarium itself. And so a young person or their family will be able to, in the same moment, not only go out and see what the bay itself has to offer in terms of wildlife, but then come in and learn even more about that wildlife itself, the resiliency, and the incredibly biodiverse shoreline that we're very lucky to have here in Newport up close at that new aquarium. And so sit tight. We're very focused on making sure we keep building out amenities for families, and also making sure that a lot of those great traditions that people carried on, while they might not look exactly the same, are still here.
Speaking of building, Rogers High School, I saw that on Facebook. Newport Public Schools posted they were signing the beam that will be the final beam that goes up here soon. Any updates on the Rogers High School construction project? Last time we talked to Superintendent Germain, there's still money that needs to be found or raised or collected for the project. But any updates from your point of view?
Our focus on education right now is really shifting to the bigger picture. The Rogers High School project is very important. It has the school building committee. The council has made it very clear that we are here to work with you as a partner, but you need to focus on getting this project done within the budget itself, and made the final allocation that we're capable of making at this point in time. We've also made it clear that we're a partner in helping them find the additional funding that they need to ensure that project gets finished, so we have a top-tier school that our students deserve. Our focus now is shifting towards the operating budget for the schools themselves and the performance within the schools. We need to make sure that every student in our community has not only the opportunity, but the support that they need to reach their full potential. Understanding what the schools are doing, what's working, what's not working, and where they need additional support is very important. Our public school committee, at the end of the day, is the policy-making body for our public schools. But we as counselors are the entity that ultimately are responsible for signing off on the funding for those programs. There is a higher level of interest right now with this current council in understanding exactly what those programs are, what's working, what's not, and what else is needed to ensure that we get academic performance at the level that it should be for the city of Newport. I think that's a positive direction. You look at the joint meeting that we had on the recent test results last week, everybody working collaboratively together to try and understand the business of standardized testing, our results to date, and the programs that are being put in place and what's working. I want to give 2 important notes on things that are working in our public school system that I do think merit recognition. The first is on attendance. Newport's public schools have made a big focus on attendance. It's something that the governor has been very vocal about, and the council as well has been supportive of. Attendance this year is almost 30% better than it was last year at this point in time. We still have a long ways to go. Every single day matters in the classroom, because we know that at the end of the day, if students aren't showing up in the classroom, they're statistically higher at risk for a number of outcome shortfalls, including their academic outcomes, drugs, instability in their own lives. And so we need to be making sure that those students are in the safest place for them, which is the classroom. The second is multi-language learners. Newport has a very large non-English speaking population. And what we found is that when those multi-language learners receive the resources and the educational support that the state currently recommends, that they are able to meet the actual overall performance of their peers in the school system. That's great news. That's an indication that we figured out something that works, and we're excited about that and trying to figure out, okay, what lessons can we take from that that might be transferable to other student populations that are struggling right now to help us improve the academic outcomes in our public schools?
One thing we talk with superintendent often about when attendance comes up or truancy or whatever it may be is that is not just something that you can fix, city council can fix, school committee. It is truly a community-wide effort. So everybody in the city can play a part in it. If you're employing a high school child, maybe make sure they're not working until 10, 11, midnight. There's different ways for the community to get involved. And I encourage people to tune in the next time we have the superintendent on, because she talks about it often. Well, that is a community-wide effort that everybody can participate in. Hey, if you see a kid, maybe you could say, why aren't you in school today? Little things like that.
It takes a village, right? And again, much like climate change, this is an area where education was slowly changing for a number of years. And then all of a sudden the COVID pandemic hit and education changed very quickly. The reality is that we're all still trying to figure out exactly how best to help kids weather that change. And the issue of absenteeism really has two different flavors. On the one hand, you have students that have things going on outside of their academic experience that make their lives particularly challenging. Maybe it's an issue with hunger. Maybe it's housing insecurity. Maybe it's the fact that they're working a job to help support their family. Maybe they have a sibling that needs extra help, and so their focus is there. Or maybe it's a parent or family member that just can't get them to school. Those are people who need a lot of support from our community, and we need to continue understanding what it is that they need and how our community partners can help support them. The other half of that, though, is cultural. These are students who, for whatever reason, their families have decided that it's okay to miss a couple days of school each month if they need to leave early for a family vacation or to cut out early to go to an appointment that was the most convenient time. That is having an enormously damaging effect on the academic outcome of those students. And everybody thinks it's not my child. My child's doing fine. They can afford to take that time out. But the numbers don't lie. When you look at the numbers and you see the impact on performance, without a doubt, that is having an impact on our students. Those are the students that we're able to reach through messaging. Those are the students who, when you stop them and you stop their families and say, hey, why aren't you in school today? It resonates, it makes a difference. Everybody has to be part of that message. And I appreciate every member of the community that's stepping up to make that part of their duty.
Newport was the first city to sign on to Governor McKee's Learn 365 last year. Wondering, is that coming to fruition? Do you see any movement on that front?
Yes, it's come together wonderfully well. I have my biweekly coordination meeting with our community partners on that tomorrow. The focus we've put is on listening to the teachers, on listening to the educators about what they need us to be doing outside the classroom to support the work that they're doing. And so Learn 365, I think the largest allocation of our funding was towards 3 community partners, the Boys and Girls Club, the Martin Luther King Center, and the Child and Family Educational Opportunity Zone run by EBCAP, and the programs they run for after school, focusing specifically on our elementary school students and helping them improve their reading and math skills. The way that we've done that is by making sure that the method of teaching that we're using in those after school programs is the same that's being used in the classroom, and then making sure that we have educators who are in a position to help support the training and the coordination with our actual on-site service providers to make sure the lessons that are being taught in a consistent format. And a data sharing agreement to make sure that those students that need the help are identified and provided with that additional help. That program just kicked off in December. The governor came down for it. It was a really fun night. We had a bunch of families there, and I'm looking forward to seeing the impact that'll have on the reading and math scores that our students are working so hard to improve.
This goes with education. This goes with a little bit of everything, but Amy writes in, and Amy says, what are you and the council actively doing about our housing crisis? What are they going to do specifically in the next 12 months? Are the current planning board and zoning board members up to the task of fixing the crisis, or are they exacerbating it?
Well, if we could wave a magic wand and fix it, I think that would be great. The reality is the housing crisis is something that is very easy to diagnose, but very difficult to identify a cure for. The council passed a number of resolutions at the outset of the last council session, kicking off in the beginning, right around this time last year. And unfortunately, what we saw happen is those resolutions and the work that we asked the city planning department to do got backburnered when the state put in a bunch of zoning changes. The state passed a substantial zoning package aimed at helping to spur the building of housing across the state. It was a one-size-fits-all approach, so a lot of things in there weren't exactly a perfect fit for Newport. But they basically said, look, you either need to make changes to your zoning laws or state law will step in and replace that. So our planning department worked incredibly hard to make the requisite changes to ensure that Newport maintained the local control that it was able to under the law. That took us right up until January 1. And so now we shift our focus back to the original housing resolutions that were passed and how we can advance that. One of those pieces called for an inventory of vacant properties in the city and a study as to what might actually be possible in terms of building housing. We need to figure out a way to develop additional housing in this community, more than just affordable, across the board, specifically middle income and workforce housing, in a way that doesn't jeopardize the character of our local neighborhoods and in a way that also doesn't overly strain the infrastructure that we have in our city to support residents and visitors who are here. There is a study that is underway right now. It was funded by a technical assistance grant that our planning department received from Rhode Island Housing to specifically look at what the capacity is that our community has for that housing and where there would be appropriate sites for there to be a development of additional housing. Again, this is not affordable housing. This is workforce, middle income housing across the board that's needed for people who live here in Newport. That study is well underway. We expect to have the results of that in the second quarter of this year. And I think that people will get to see a little bit more of it through the work the planning board is doing in the next couple of months.
Mayor, I think you and I have talked about this before, but you see, I know there's not a plan yet, but I wonder if you've seen any city have success with incentivizing building owners. There's a lot of one-story buildings in Newport along Broadway, along Thames Street. If they were to put on a second floor, put a couple apartments in there, is that a possible solution?
It absolutely is a possible solution. It has to be balanced, though, with building out a transportation system that's ready to support residents who would be here without a motor vehicle. When you look at expanding density out, I'm looking out the window because Broadway's right there. You need to be thinking about what that does to available parking. And if we aren't going to be providing parking for people in those places, Newport needs to be a city that has a transportation network that's strong enough to support those residents who want to live here without a vehicle, having the ability and flexibility to get to the places they need to get without having to own a motor vehicle. That's why the passage of the Master Transportation Plan last year in the beginning of our year was so important, because that really set out a roadmap for how we can start to develop that. So what's interesting is that in some cities where they are building additional density without parking, they have a requirement that they put funding into a transportation fund to help support the build out of additional public transit. I think that the direction we're going to be headed in as we consider more density downtown is transit being developed around transportation hubs, and how it is that we ensure those hubs are strong enough to support people getting around town. Because what we don't want to do is exacerbate the existing problem. We want to make sure that these things are getting developed in tandem. The other thing we did last year that's worth noting, Ryan, is we really cracked down on illegal short-term rentals with an increase in the fees to help us fund the support of an enforcement mechanism in the city to actually look at those illegal short-term rentals operating in our residential neighborhoods, taking housing stock away from residents who badly need it, but also jeopardizing the character of our communities and ensuring that they are paying their fair share and that they're not operating in places that they should not be operating. We have a lot of short-term rental operators who are carrying around with the great Newport tradition of hosting somebody in a guest room. That's not who we're after. We're after those players that have come in here, they've bought homes off Broadway, they've bought homes in the Fifth Ward, in those residential neighborhoods where standalone Airbnb should not be existing, and they're taking away housing stock from our residents and operating places in a manner that is unsafe, that also threatens the character of those neighborhoods. That was a big step forward for the council, and I'm excited to see that start yielding more results.
How often is inventory taken on the short-term rentals that are out there on the platforms, as well as is it possible to record whether people are selling houses because their Airbnbs aren't successful?
Well, I'm sure Yeah, I'm sure that it is possible to record that. If that's data we're capturing right now, I don't believe that it is. I can tell you that anecdotally, I have heard from multiple people that, hey, my partner and I were just able to buy our first home because somebody who had bought a short-term rental, an out-of-state investor, basically realized this was going to be a whole lot more difficult to pull off than they realized, and turned around and made the decision to sell. This is a business that requires you to be on site to be effective in the long run. We know that this is a market that's come under substantial strain recently, and so I'm expecting that trend to continue. The data itself, the number of short-term rentals, what's happening, what's going on with the registrations, is part of the focus that we have for our new short-term rental enforcement coordinator. Their job is to be taking data from multiple sites that are available, not just the city and state registrations, but also from sites like AirDNA and Host Compliance, both of which we subscribe to, and using that data to help us get a better grasp as to the number of Airbnbs we have, where they're operating, and where we need to invest resources in cracking down on enforcement.
I guess one good tool will be there's an election coming up this year. And I remember 2 years ago when we spoke, I think a comment that I remember from the first time we spoke and did one of these interviews was how many homes were dark when you were going up to the doors. And it'll be interesting to hear from the candidates this fall or summer, how many houses are dark and empty.
Yeah, or the other big tell is when you walk up to the house and you see that combination code lock on the door or the lock box, and if you look out and there isn't a realtor sign, that's a sign that that might be a short-term rental. What is important though is that we obviously have a great population here who spends a good portion of their year here, but maybe not all year. And what we don't want is residents feeling like they need to drop a dime on somebody who might actually be a neighbor that's just here for part of the year, rather than operating an illegal short-term rental. That's why one of the things that the administration did last year was put a map online of all the registered short-term rentals that exist in the city. So if you go on the city's website, you can look that right up, and you can look and see if that house down the street in the corner that seems dark an awful lot is a short-term rental, or maybe it's just one of our seasonal neighbors who may be south for a few months during the winter months. And so I encourage people to use that tool. Similarly, please take advantage of the Report It tool that exists on our website. That is a wonderfully efficient tool for us to hear from the community, but also to make sure we're tackling issues as they come up. I give the administration a lot of credit. They are very responsive on it. And I think it's a really good tool to help residents deal with everything from illegal short-term rentals to coyote sightings to whether or not their garbage has been picked up on time.
All this going on while there is a search for a new city manager. A quick update on that?
Those applications close out on the 15th. The council itself will be meeting an executive session tomorrow. I'm sorry, not tomorrow, on Wednesday, to review what it is that they would like to use as a selection process itself. I do expect us to move swiftly from that point to narrow down the field of candidates to a select few that we will interview, hopefully making a selection by the end of the first quarter, allowing us to have somebody in place for the second quarter in that role on a permanent basis. Newport needs a professional city manager that has the security of a contract to know they can look forward for the long term, make the tough decisions that we need as a community. I'm very hopeful the city council will support that.
And any updates on the Pell Bridge ramps, all of that area there and just off the bridges, anything that people should know?
There is an enormous amount of construction happening on a regular basis. It has a major impact on our neighbors in the surrounding area. So I want to start by just saying thank you to all those neighbors who have been patient with that process, who have made sure their voice is heard so that we can try and have what influence we can to help mitigate the impact that their neighborhoods are feeling. That being said, we know that that project is going to free up 25 acres of developable land when it's complete. The city council has created and appointed an ad hoc advisory commission of experts who specialize in the work of helping acquire, remediate, and prepare such properties for development in the future. Their task is to give us the roadmap for those steps. It's very important to note this is not a group of individuals who is telling us what should be developed there, or who's making a determination as to what those agreements might look like. Their job is literally just to get us to the starting line to understand what do we need to do to get control of that property? What do we need to do to make sure that property is actually attractive for development in the future? They meet on a monthly basis, and they were all recently appointed, so they're just now getting to work. We expect there to be quarterly reports out of that group, providing us with insight as to the work that we're doing. So when they get to their final recommendation, it's something that we've all been learning about on a consistent basis, rather than some surprise report that drops in the city and then gets put on a shelf.
Mayor, was there, we rapid fired a lot of topics today. Was there anything that we did not get to?
I would say fire away, Ryan, and feel free to reach out whenever you want to have me on to talk. It's always a pleasure. I know that your readers and viewers are very in tune to what's going on in the city, that they care deeply. We appreciate hearing from them on a regular basis. So to all of those who have sent emails on everything, from the snack bar to concerns about public education, thank you for your outreach to the council. It makes a difference. We are listening, and we are working as hard as we can to make sure that we are tackling the issues Newport needs.
Last question, just a couple ways people can get involved. I'm sure there's boards and commissions that have openings. Anything else you need from the residents right now?
Yeah, first, yeah, please apply to boards and commissions. We are constantly having turnover on our boards and commissions. It is the nature of both term limits, but also of people's lives shifting and taking them in different directions. Secondly, please, as you see opportunities to engage with the strategic planning process, whether it's filling out the surveys on our website or otherwise, please provide those. We take them seriously. They're having a big impact on the direction that we're going with the strategic plan for the city itself. And otherwise, stay involved with the different nonprofits and organizations that we have in our community. They are, at the end of the day, what makes Newport such a special place. Oftentimes, a big part of our task is making sure that they at least have enough support from government to plow through what they need to in order to provide the many services they do to the people who are badly needed in our community for additional support.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate you joining us today and giving me 6 minutes of extra time. I try to stay right on schedule because I know you're very busy and there's a lot going on. So I appreciate it, Mayor, and we'll chat with you very soon.
Thank you, Ryan. Happy New Year.
All right. So that is Newport Mayor Xay. We appreciate him joining us today. If you had any questions and I did not get to them, please send me an email again, and I will forward them over to the mayor and try to get you an answer. Let's see here. There are some more questions coming in. So what I will do is Sully and Sophia and Rob, I will get those questions over to the mayor and try to update them in our newsletter or on our website. Thanks for watching.